Section 7 of Orpheus with his Lute by W.M.L. Hutchinson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Mother and the Maid. Then all the nine rose up together and chanted a hymn in praise of Leto's golden-haired child, the Deucalion born, the archer invincible, king in holy Delphi. They sang how he increased in wisdom and stature until he came to that fullness of youthful bloom which he wears eternally, how Zeus loved him as a son and made him revealer of his will to mortals, how sullen earth was reconciled to him ere long, being made glad with his beauty as with a lasting spring. They hailed him prophet and seer, nor by these names alone, for Apollo, they sang, is the Lord and giver of all healing and of all sweet minstrelsy. While they were yet singing, the sun arose, and Orpheus heard no more. That day he said to his father, "Father, if you could leave your work a while, would you not journey to Delphi and see that marvelous temple and hear what the god would say to you?" "Nay, child," said his father, sighing, "it is not to Delphi I would go. Men seek Apollo's temple when they desire counsel for time coming, not when they need comfort for what is past. For that, as I have heard, one must go on pilgrimage to the goddesses at Eleusis." "Who are they, father?" asked Orpheus, "and where is Eleusis?" "Their names are not lightly spoken," answered Oiagros, "but men call them the Mother and the Maid. As for Eleusis, it is the place of their sanctuary, far away in the south country, so far, indeed, that I have never met with any who has been there. I would," he added in a lower tone, "I knew if tales say truly, that there a man may find peace." "Peace?" repeated Orpheus wonderingly. "But have we not peace here in the forest?" "Ask me no more," said his father, "for you are too little to understand." So the child kept these things in his heart, and when the sixth night came, he asked the sisters for the story of those goddesses whom men call the Mother and the Maid. Then one who was sitting a little apart, playing softly on a flute, laid it down and said, "With your good will, sisters, I should gladly tell this tale." "Say on, Euterpe," cried they all. "But first," said Thalia, "let us hear for prelude the strain that pilgrims march to along the sacred way of Eleusis. Listen, Orpheus, and you shall fancy you too are drawing near the presence of the goddesses." The flute player smiled and began an air that seemed the very breathing of a soul uplifted in rapturous hope. Orpheus closed his eyes and heard as in a dream the echoing footfalls of a multitude, and for one strange moment it was as though he were one of that throng invisible, hastening onward, onward, to behold some great sight, he knew not what. The strain ceased, and looking up quickly, he cried, "The pilgrims! What is it they go to see? Oh, tell me how to join them, that I may see it too." "Patience, my child," said Calliope tenderly. "The day is yet far distant when you shall set out upon that pilgrimage, and it is not we who will be your guides. So now listen well to Euterpe's story." Then Euterpe took the child's hand in hers, and thus began. The goddess Demeter was the fairest daughter of earth, and many of the Olympians sought her in marriage, but she would none of them. Nay, she refused to wed with Zeus himself, for she desired no lord over her, but rather to live as she listed. One day, when the immortals were feasting together, certain of the goddesses who were mothers fell to boasting of their children, and mocked at Demeter because she was childless. And being grieved thereat, she left the heavenly halls, and came and entreated earth that she might likewise have a child. The All-Mother granted her prayer, and while Demeter sojourned in the lovely land of Sicily, a daughter was born to her, whom she named Persephone. But when the child began to speak, she called herself, in baby fashion, Kori, that is, girl, and Demeter, as mothers will, fondly used that name for her darling. The little Corey grew up to maidenhood in the soft Sicilian meads, herself fair and pure as the lilies she walked among. Never was maiden so tenderly reared as she, and never mother and daughter loved one another so dearly as these two, who were seldom parted for a single hour. Now Zeus was ill-pleased that beautiful Demeter came no more to his palace on high, nor had he forgotten the slight she put upon him in refusing to be his queen. So when he knew that all her joy was in sweet Corey, he bided his time, saying to himself, "Let the haughty goddess, who spurned all suitors, beware her child meet not with one who will brook no denial." When Corey had seen 14 summers, it chanced that as she walked with her mother in a wooded vale, they came to a deep, shady pool, and because the day was hot, the maiden was fain to bathe in it. As she came out of the water, she spied a bright mirror of silver lying in the grass, and took it up, and looked therein. "See, mother," she cried, "what a beautiful thing this is! Look, it will show you your face more clearly than the clearest water." Demeter took the mirror and laughed, remembering that her girl had never seen one, but when she looked therein she turned pale, for it showed her not her own face, but the face of Corey. She turned it swiftly, lest Corey should see, and stole another glance while making pretense of haste to robe her. There was her child's face still, as it were a picture painted by art divine. "May I keep it, mother?" asked Corey, wringing out her long wet tresses. "No, sweetheart," answered Demeter. "It is an evil thing made by art magical," and so saying, she flung the mirror far into the pool. Corey could not forbear a cry of disappointment as it flashed and sank, but her mother comforted her with the promise of another like it, only much more beautiful, which the smith god Hephaestus should make for her. "I did well," thought Demeter, as they went homewards. "For aught I know, the thing was laid in my child's way by some envious witch to cast a spell on her. There can be no good in such a mirror as that, but at least it can work no harm where it is now." But in this the goddess was mistaken, little knowing whither she had sent the mirror. Down it sank, deeper than ever plummet sounded, for the water of that pool rose straight up from gloomy underworld, out of a fountain in King Pluto's palace garden. And as Pluto walked in his garden of poppies, he saw a glimmering thing in the black marble basin of the fountain, and drew it forth, and behold, it was a silver mirror. But instead of his own face, it showed him the face of a young maiden, divinely fair, with starry eyes that smiled as if alive. The dark-browed king stared upon that perfect face like one spellbound, and still it moved not, nor changed, turn the mirror as he would. "It is not a vision," he muttered. "It is a picture, and yet it cannot be. It lives. This is some enchantment. I will go to Hecate, queen of witches, and learn what it may mean." So he went through the nether shades to the house of Hecate, and the queen of witches came forth to meet him, and said, "What would my lord with me, and why is his countenance troubled? Is it so unpleasing to him that a water lily has bloomed in the fountain of his garden?" "Hecate," answered Pluto, "do not jest with me, for I see you know what brings me here. Tell me, mistress of all spells, whence this mirror came, and what it is. If it holds the likeness of a living maiden, tell me where I may find her, for be she goddess or mortal, I will make her my bride and queen." "King," said Hecate, "touching the mirror I would not, if I were you, be over-curious. What more concerns you to know is that the maiden you see therein is Persephone, daughter of Demeter." "Then I go to Sicily," cried the king, "for there, as I hear, the goddess has made her abode, and I will ask her this very day for her daughter's hand." "Not so hasty," said the queen of witches. "Think you Demeter, she who would not wed Olympian Zeus, will give Persephone to his brother? The maiden is the apple of her eye, and never will she consent to lose her, least of all by sending her to this dark realm of yours. Show me then the way to win this maiden, said Pluto, and you shall have what reward you will. Nay, Hecate answered, I have had my reward already, but you shall, if it please you, restore me something that is my own. Very willingly, said the king. What may it be? The mirror, replied the queen of witches, smiling subtly. So, when he had heard her counsel, Pluto gave her the enchanted mirror and went his way. Now the reward Hecate had received already was this. She is a goddess of the underworld, and has her dwelling there, but by night she roams on earth, and when the moon is full she has power in heaven, which none else of the nether gods may darken with their presence. This power was the price she asked of Zeus, when he bade her devise a spell whereby King Pluto should become enamored of Demeter's daughter. For if that were brought to pass, Zeus knew his stern brother would rob Demeter of her one treasure, though she guarded it never so jealously. The queen of witches, having obtained from Zeus the promise she required, went home, and so wrought by her enchantments on the mirror that it should keep forever the likeness it first reflected, and she caused it to appear when and where it did, that none but Chore might be the first to look therein. Had the maiden kept it, full soon would the witch goddess have spirited it away again, but now all had fallen out as she desired. Not long after this, Chore came to her mother, where she sat spinning fleecy wool from her golden distaff, and prayed her leave to go gathering flowers in the meadows. Go, heart's delight, said Demeter, only stray not far away. Stay in the near fields, where I shall hear you if you call. Chore promised obedience, and with light heart she took her way along the blossomy meadows, singing aloud in the glad May morning. Soon she had filled the lap of her robe with flowers of all hues, and sat down on a primrose bank to weave them into garlands. While she was thus busied, 3 beautiful damsels dressed in green, with green wreaths on their hair, stood beside her and greeted her courteously, and timidly she asked them who they were. We are wood nymphs from the hills, said one, come down to play in these fair fields, and to gather flowers like you. Ah, you are weaving May lilies. If you will come with us a little way, we will show you far lovelier ones. See, she said, and held out a handful of fragrant snowy bells, lovelier indeed than Chore had ever seen. Chore longed to see where they grew, but remembering her promise, she told the damsels that she must not wander beyond sight of home. Then play with us here a while, fairest maiden, they said, and Chore, nothing loath, began a merry game of ball with these friendly strangers. But in the eagerness of play, she did not mark how the damsels drew her ever farther and farther afield, as they tossed their painted ball from hand to hand, until, flushed and panting, all the players threw themselves down on a grassy knoll to rest. Then Chore saw she was come to a green plain unknown to her, and starting up, ashamed, "Oh," she cried, "I should not have come so far. I must hasten home. Where lies the way?" "Nay, now, what harm?" said one of the damsels. "'Tis but a short way, and you cannot miss it. And now you may take home those loveliest lilies. See, they are yonder in the dell." Yonder, in sooth, were the lilies, blowing in myriads on the farther margin of a brook that ran through a mossy hollow of the plain. Chore sprang down the knoll and tripped on her white bare feet through the shallow stream. I will stay but a moment, she thought, and as she plucked the flowers, "Kind damsels," she called, "will you not come hither and help me gather?" "We cannot," answered they all in low, strange tones. "We dare not cross running water." At that word Chore looked back, sore affrighted, for she knew none save witches and warlocks thus fear running water, and even as she looked, the damsels vanished into air. That same instant she felt the ground quake under her with a long muffled roar, and saw a black chasm yawn at her very feet. Terror bereft the maiden of power to stir. One shriek of "Mother!" came from her pale lips. Then, with rigid hands still clasping her lilies, she sank down in a swoon. And thus she saw not how there rose out of the chasm a sulphurous cloud, and in the midst thereof a fiery chariot, and 4 coal-black steeds with eyes of flame. Nor knew she that the dark charioteer caught her up in one strong arm, and bore her downward into the gulf, just ere the trembling earth closed once more. It was now high noon, and Demeter rose up from her spinning to make ready a midday meal of barley cakes and honey and wild fruits. Then she called her daughter once and again from the doorway, but no voice replied. The child has fallen asleep, she thought, resting somewhere in the shade, and she went a little way from the house, calling as she went. Still Corey did not answer, and the mother's heart began to beat fast with disquietude. Vainly she searched the meadows far and near, vainly scanned every shady nook and every cool resting place by stream or spring. All the long day the goddess wandered, distracted to and fro, now speeding on with frantic haste, now pausing in heart-sick doubt whither to turn, and ever calling louder, more despairingly, her lost one's name. Ranging further and further, she came at last to a dell where lilies bloomed beside a bubbling fount, and lo, amongst them lay Corey's silver-broidered veil. Demeter snatched it up and kissed it with tears, crying, "She has been here. Ah, beloved, how could you stray so far alone? Surely she is near. She cannot have gone further than this. Corey, Corey, answer me." But all was silent around, save for the bubbling water. Now there was no sign to be seen of Corey's fate, neither trace of the rending of the ground. The little brook, indeed, was swallowed up, but King Pluto had caused it to well forth again as a fountain, and hidden its former course under the flowery sward. Nor could Demeter find any token of her child's presence in that peaceful-seeming spot, except the veil that had slipped from her hair while she bent over the flowers. Baffled, yet with reviving hope, she went questing hither and thither through all the region round, and at shut of eve came to the slopes of Etna. Then there met her a giant shepherd, of the race of the one-eyed Cyclopes, driving his flocks home from pasture, and she asked him if he knew aught of her daughter. But he had seen nothing and heard nothing of such a maiden. "I will halloo to my brothers and kinsmen," said he. "It may be they can give you word of her." And with uncouth bellowing he summoned to him the rest of the Cyclopes. But neither could they give the goddess any tidings, and in her weariness she sat down and wept. The giant folk pitied her grief, and would have had her lodge with them till the morning, sharing their rough cheer. But she would not stay, nor break her fast, and having begged of them 2 kindled pine brands for torches, she took her way onwards through the shades of night. Dawn found that sorrowing mother still upon the quest, and for many a day thereafter she searched through all the isle of Sicily. At last she came again to her house, hoping against hope to find Corey returned, and her house was silent and desolate. When she saw that, the goddess tore the golden fillets from her hair and cast dust upon her sacred head, and instead of her shining robes she put on a coarse and sable vesture, and veiled herself with a veil of darkest grain. And she swore by the dread oath that binds all the immortal gods that she would never suffer her eyelids to slumber nor her feet to rest until she had found Persephone, though she should search the wide world through. Then, staff in hand, she journeyed forth once more. What tongue may tell of all her long, sad wanderings over sea and land? Of all she met, of the shy woodland nymphs and shaggy satyrs on the hills, of the sea fairies on lonely beaches, of mortal wayfarers and villagers, she asked for tidings of Corey, and always she asked in vain. Meanwhile, Earth, her mother, mourned with the mourning goddess, and fain would have whispered that she knew what had befallen Corey, but fear of Zeus and Pluto held her silent. So in every land where Demeter passed grieving, all living creatures of earth and all green things began to droop and languish, as though her tears blighted where they fell. The cattle sickened in the withered pastures. The tilled fields yielded no harvest. Famine and plague laid waste the homes of men. Zeus sent his rain, but it availed not, for the stubborn ground would no longer drink it, and it arose again in low-hanging, steaming mists, laden with pestilence. Nor could the sun disperse those vapors, so dimmed with sorrow was his bright visage as he beheld the affliction of Demeter. Meanwhile the goddess came into the land of Greece, and drew near to a village called Eleusis. There, being wearied, she sat her down on a great stone by the wayside near to a well. It was towards evening, and the women of the village came to the well to draw water, and when they saw the pale mourner sitting there in poor and sombre garb, they began to mock and revile her, as was their custom with strangers, bidding her begone for a prowling beggar-wife. Demeter regarded them silently with her great patient eyes, and the divine sorrow of that gaze might have pierced hearts of flint. But in their blind malice the women were the more enraged that she sat there serenely silent, as one who heard not, and with one accord they caught up stones and sherds to pelt her withal. Suddenly their shrill, fierce gabbling changed to screeches of eldritch laughter. Their bright blue robes turned feathery on their dwindling bodies, and the next instant they fluttered aloft and fled to the woods, a troop of screeching jays. Now came by the well a little boy with curly head, and looked curiously at the goddess, still sitting tranced with sadness. He passed, turned back to look again, and stole gently to her side. Children are clearer-eyed than older mortals to discern the gods, and though Demeter suffered him not to know her for what she was, the boy could feel that she was some great one, perhaps a banished princess. "Are you unhappy, lady?" he said to her, "or only wearied? And why do you sit so late by the wayside?" "Both weary and sad at heart am I, my child," answered Demeter, "and I sit here because none in Eleusis have any kindness for a stranger." "You cannot have heard of my father," said the little boy, "or you would not say so. He makes all strangers welcome, and so does my mother, for they say a guest brings a blessing to the house. If you will come with me, lady, I know they will gladly give you shelter." "Give me your hand, child," said Demeter, "and lead me to your home." So they both went together, and when they came to the house, the father and mother received the stranger with all kindness, bidding her sit down and sup with them. "There is dearth and murrain in the land," said the good man, "or we would give you better fare than these barley bannocks." But Demeter said she needed nothing save a draught of water, and leave to repose herself beside the hearth that night, for she was under a vow to fast and keep vigil. Now, when all the household had gone to rest and were sleeping soundly, the mother, whose name was Metaneira, awoke, and heard a sound like the crackling of a fire. She rose up softly to see what this could be, and opened the door between her chamber and the house-place where they had left the stranger woman. Ah, what a sight was there for a mother's eyes! A great fire blazed upon the hearth, and the stranger was holding over the flames the motionless body of her little son. Metaneira's shriek aroused her husband, and both rushed together upon the stranger. But she drew back, clasping the child to her bosom, and suddenly her pale, worn face was transfigured with light celestial, so that their eyes dazzled to look on it. Golden gleams suffused her raiment. Divine fragrance streamed about her, as she stood before them, a goddess manifest. "Callias and Metaneira," she said to the trembling pair, "for the kindness you have showed me, I would have made your son immortal by the virtue of flame. But now that may not be. None may renew that sacred spell if it is broken in the making. Take your child, Metaneira. He is unhurt and will awake anon, knowing naught of what has passed. Bid him farewell from the stranger woman, and say she will one day return." With these words the goddess departed out of their sight. In the morning Callias went early to his granary, that he might thresh what little barley remained there for his wife to grind, because their meal barrel was empty. And behold, the granary was full of barley to overflowing. And as he ran to tell his wife, she came to meet him, crying, "The meal barrel that I emptied last night is full of meal." Then they gave thanks to the unknown goddess, and Callias built an altar beside his hearth, whereon he and his, in aftertime, offered tithes of first fruits to Our Lady of the Corn. After this, Demeter came to the town of Hermione by the sea, and now at last she heard tidings. Of all the gods, the folk of that place honor most King Pluto, who has a temple hard by the town, in a cypress grove. It is not lawful for any man, even Pluto's priest, to set foot within that temple, for it is builded over a chasm in the earth that leads down into the realm of darkness. Thither came Demeter, and saw an altar of stone before the temple, with this inscription: "To Pluto, king in Hades," in letters worn and ancient. But underneath, in letters newly graven, was added, "And to Queen Persephone." Then Demeter's heart burned within her, yet she restrained herself, and said to the grave priest of the sanctuary, "Pluto I know, but whose is this new name I see graven on his altar?" "The god has made known to us," said he, "that he has taken to himself a bride, and will have us honor her with all the honors that we render to him by that name you see." When she heard that, Demeter left him and went swiftly to the halls of Zeus, and stood in her mourning garb before his throne, making bitter complaint that Hades' king had carried her daughter into captivity. Zeus sought to appease her with smooth words, but Demeter would not hear them. "Tell me not," she cried, "that Persephone is queen of vast dominions. Rather would I see her thrall to the meanest mortal that looks on the light of day than reigning in the kingdom of the dead. Bid Pluto restore my child, or I will curse the ground that hides her from me with the curse of a desolate mother." Then Zeus, fearing lest that curse should blast the whole earth, and men forsake his altars when they saw he could not save them, called the sisters three, who spin the threads of fate for mortals and immortals, and bade them declare the lot appointed for Persephone. "It is ordained," they answered, "that Pluto shall let her go free if she has tasted no food in the underworld, but not otherwise." Thereupon Zeus sent Hermes, his messenger, to the house of Pluto to ask Persephone if she had eaten of anything since she came there. Now the maid in her grief had tasted neither meat nor drink at Pluto's table, but wandering alone in his garden, she had plucked a pomegranate and eaten one morsel. So, when the messenger of Zeus inquired of her whether she had taken food in that house, she answered no. But a servant of King Pluto, called Ascalaphus, had seen her taste the pomegranate, and he told Hermes, who brought word of it to Zeus. After which Ascalaphus repented, and not enduring to behold her whom he had betrayed, fled to upper earth, where he lurked in woods and caves, eating his heart, until Demeter had compassion on him, and changed him to a screech owl, the bird that still bodes ill luck. And so Persephone must have dwelt forever in the sunless realms, had not Zeus, in dread of her mother's curse, prevailed on her stern lord to let her revisit earth for the half of every year. Thus, with each returning spring, she rises again into the sunlit world, and once more feels her mother's arms about her as they kiss with happy tears. The while hill and vale, forest and field, and all that therein is, break forth into joy and singing at the trysting of Demeter and her quarry. Then roam they far and wide, visiting with their blessing pasture and cornland, and never stand the meadows so deep in sweet herbage, never ripens the grain so full and ruddy as where the goddesses have set their printless feet. To many lands they come, and Demeter sees again in joy regions she traversed once in solitary grief. But best they love Sicily, for the sake of the maid's blissful childhood, and next Eleusis, where first a kindly roof sheltered the mourning mother. Some say, moreover, that Eleusis was the place of Persephone's uprise. But the truth is, no man may know the place made sacred by that resurrection, unless the goddesses reveal it to him, and then he may not speak of it. True, nevertheless, it is that they show grace and favor in a special measure to those who seek their temple at Eleusis, and that the temple itself was once the house of Callias. For in due time Demeter returned thither, as she had said, and showed herself to his son Triptolemus, who was become a lad. In those days men ate bread of barley and of rye, for wheat was yet unknown, and they tilled the ground with mattocks and hoes. Triptolemus was threshing barley in the threshing floor when the goddess stood before him, bearing a wheat sheaf in her arms, and he lifted up his eyes and cried, "It is Our Lady of the Corn." Then Demeter made herself known to him, and gave him the wheat sheaf, bidding him sow the new grain in his father's fields, and she taught him also to make and to use the first plough. And before she departed, she charged Triptolemus to share these her gifts with the folk of that country, teaching them to plough the fallow fields, and to sow Demeter's grain, which should be the staff of men's life for all time to come. When Callias heard these things, he thought himself no longer worthy to inhabit the dwelling which so great a goddess had twice hallowed with her presence, and removing thence with all his household, he set it apart as a temple to her honor. And at the sacrifice of dedication, the mother and the maid appeared in sight of all, standing upon the altar with looks of benign majesty. "In this house," said Demeter, "Callias ever sheltered the homeless, and gave freely of his store to the needy, yea, when he believed that he must lack for bread on the morrow. Therefore he shall dwell here our priest, and steward of our hidden treasure, whereby many shall be made rich." "To this house," said Persephone, "Triptolemus guided my mother when she was weary and broken-hearted. For this cause the weary and broken-hearted shall never seek comfort here in vain, and Triptolemus shall be our chosen servant to guide the feet of many into the way of peace." Now, as they promised, so it was, and in the sanctuary where Callias and his son first ministered, the mystic rites of Eleusis bring light out of darkness to all souls that turn with faith unfeigned to the Mother and the Maid. End of The Mother and the Maid. Read by Mark Harrington, Framingham, Massachusetts.